This is a unique phenomenon in human history.
C'est une crise, comme vous l'avez dit, d'un genre très particulier parce que c'est la première fois dans l'histoire humaine que face à un danger mortel pour un certain nombre de gens, on a décidé d'arrêter l'économie.
On est dans l'instant permanent.
300,000 people can die every day from hunger.
C'est aussi aux citoyens de dire halte. Je suis surpris par l'obéissance des masses.
The importance of forming judgments. The importance of saying, I will wait to see a transcript before I comment.
Ces plaintes ont quelque chose de totalement indécent.
The coronavirus has had an impact on humanity as a whole.
Thank you very much to all of you for attending this Repost webinar. Thank you to Simon de Pury for agreeing to participating to our Repost. Thank you, Vladislav Davidzon, for leading the interview today. I am Sophie Wiesenfeld, founder of the Hexagon Society, a Franco-British pro-European think tank focused on the production and promotion of impactful cultural content in order to fight obscurantism, populism, racism, and the threat of democracy. Repost is a new open democratic forum, a new online and live media in which our participants will have the opportunity to hear high-value speakers and debate with them during the conference. So, feel free to ask questions and raise your hand without gloves, please. With Repost, no mask, no gloves. The world is free. Between the approvers and the plotters, there's still room for democratic debate, a committed debate. This is Repost. All the benefits of today's talk will be donated to support the Foundation Prince Albert II of Monaco, which fight for the preservation of the planet. We will see later in the discussion how the planet, the coronavirus crisis, and the art are finally all connected. So Simon, you are known as the Mick Jagger of the auctions, one of the best knowledge of art market. You will explain us today how you feel that the connection exists between the artist and the social environment. What will be according to you, the future of cultural institutions, fairs, auction houses, of course, the art market, how you feel it. And also a question that I think you are, as usual, very avant-gardist, is like urban art versus countryside art. I think you will explain us your exhibition of Newton in Petworth, which is a very avant-garde as usual. And Vladislav, you are politic and culture critic, namely with Tablet Magazine and the New Observer, and you have a wide knowledge of art and politics. So I think this is a great match, and I'm very happy to welcome you on Repost. First, I asked the first question and then give the word to Vlad. What was your best piece of art during the quarantine and why? The one which was around you and who make you feel happy on a day-to-day basis because they were part of your day-to-day life. Simon.
Well, probably the work of art that my 9-year-old daughter sent to me because I started the quarantine on my own, alone. I had just come back from Paris and I was concerned, of seeing her too quickly. But once I had passed, the critical first 2 weeks, she came over, and before she came over, she sent me a huge smiley, which I had printed out on the computer and hung above my bed. So that is clearly my favorite work of art that I got during this quarantine time. Now, generally, as a collector, it's always a permanent quest. You're like a hunter. You always are looking out for your next discovery, for something new. And so whenever I'm asked, what is your favorite work? It's always the next one that you don't have yet. The most desirable one is, of course, the one that you don't have yet.
Yes, I think you are right. So the drawing of the smileys of your daughter was part of the piece of art you cherished during this quarantine. Also, I would like to ask a question regarding how you think we could connect the artist world and the social environment. you think there is a link between the artist and the social environment, and how can we connect this?
Yes, well, first of all, I think that artists are like mediums. They're always ahead of our time. They see things that are going to happen, or they feel things intuitively that are going to happen that we common mortals may not feel yet. And so they are very, very important figures in the world. And as an artist, you are linked to what is happening around you. You are linked to what is happening in the world. And so automatically your practice will convey some of your preoccupations. Now, the danger, of course, is that the art market is only accessible to a very small amount of people, given the prices that some of the artworks are fetching on that market. And so sometimes I see people who are intimidated at walking into an art gallery, or intimidated attending an auction, because they feel, no, this is just something for a small group of insiders. And I'm always very sad when that reaction is there, because every one of us, every single person of us, we react instinctively and instantly to an artwork, to visual impulses. When we see something, each of us have a reaction, and each of these reactions is legitimate. We do not need to feel intimidated in any way. We should not feel intimidated to express what we feel about an artwork, whether we like it or if we don't like it. And music, of course, is the same thing. Everybody who listens to music has an immediate reaction. Then, of course, once you get into it, the more and more and more music you listen to it, automatically what is truly good starts to leap out. It's exactly the same thing with art. The more you look at it, the more you spend your time going into museums, going into exhibitions, into art fairs, into auctions, etc. The more you do, the more what is truly great starts leaping out at you. Now, you have some artists that measure themselves purely against art history, and some others who really take very much as the center of their practice some issues that are of great concern to all of us. So obviously the environment is a big, big concern for all of us, and is at the center of preoccupation of a number of artists.
That's great. I just want to start with the very obvious, because we can't avoid it. So the only question is, do we start with it, or do we do it in the middle, or do we conclude with it? The role of coronavirus and auctioneering, fairing, exhibiting, buying, selling, curating during coronavirus. I mean, it's a very, very broad theme, but let's start with just, before we go off into little questions, what do you think about the situation?
Well, obviously, the coronavirus has had an impact on humanity as a whole. It has had an impact on each of us individually. I consider it as a wake-up call for humanity as a whole. I consider it as an individual wake-up call for each of us, and each of us have to think, what are we going to do differently? Now, the art world, of course, is a microcosm in the overall, world, and it has been clearly very much affected. The most immediate effect it has had is that most warehouses where art is being stored are in lockdown. So I have artworks that are being stored in various storage places. I cannot access any of those, and I cannot, if you, Vlad, want to buy a work that is stored in one of these warehouses, I maybe would be able to sell it to you, but I would not be able to have it delivered to you right now.
Till October, or November.
Leave will be solved fairly quickly, because the art warehouses will probably be amongst the first ones that will be allowed to reopen when the guidelines will be issued in various countries. For instance, in Germany, the art warehouses did not close at any stage. They did not have a lot of work to do, but they continued to function. So that is an immediate kind of practical issue. Then the next issue, as far as the market is concerned, is, of course, what effect does it have on your mood? Do you feel like you really want to spend money on buying an artwork? As we all know, we do not need art to live. We do know what are the essential things that everybody needs to focus on. Yet, obviously, even before Corona, I couldn't imagine a life without art. And it is interesting to see that even now, during Corona, so many people, in fact, are really yearning to look at art or to have a dialogue with art. And you see this in all the things that are happening on the social media. You have all these people who reenact famous paintings, or you have these memes that become viral with profiles of various artists. For instance, Edward Hopper. Everybody thinks, well, Edward Hopper is the artist about solitude, about loneliness. And so a lot of his artworks have been used by a lot of people as symbolic for the time we're now living through. Then, but anybody who owns a mega artwork, if I say mega, I would say in the trophy category, I work at the top end of the pyramid. I always say the art market is like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you have a very small group of individuals in the world who will be prepared to spend, let's say, $100 million on a single artwork or more. Then you go further down the pyramid, let's say at $50 million, you have slightly more people. Then you go down all the way to the pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid is the millions and millions and millions of people who every day are buying things on eBay. And eBay is like the world's largest flea market in a way, because you can buy so many different things. And very often people are buying at different parts of the pyramid. For instance, I love high and low, so I do buy on eBay. I do buy little mugs, ceramic mugs that are shaped in the shape of cartoon figures. They cost you $15 or $10, or sometimes only $8, and you find them on eBay. But the collecting instinct is an instinct that every one of us have. You have it as a child. I see it with my 9-year-old daughter. She built a whole collection of dolls initially, and then she started collecting other toys. When I was a little boy, I was collecting dinky toys, which were little cars. So it's an instinct we all have in ourselves. Now, the top works, I do not think will come back on the market so quickly, because anybody who owns something like that, unless they really need to sell it, will not think this is the best moment to put it on the market. So you will have a drying up at the top end in terms of artworks becoming available. Now, if you go further down, obviously there are a lot of people who already now do need to sell what they have. And so if you take the price level between $10,000 and $100,000, there are already a number of those works that are being offered, that are coming on the market. I would say they're currently being offered at a discount of 25 to 35%, maybe from what these same works would have done pre-corona. Now, the very interesting thing is, of course, that if you buy shrewdly and if you buy well, some of these works in that price category one day will be at a completely different place in the pyramid. Some of these works will become true icons as taste constantly evolves, and some works by some very young artists or emerging artists one day will be considered to be major and will of course be much more expensive. And so in past crises, like after the big crash of 1929 or in the 1970s, then again in 1990, some collectors bought incredibly well, because whoever goes against the stream, whoever goes against the prevailing mood is the one who's coming out the winner. But of course, even then, you do need to have the necessary means to be able to buy things. Even you can buy them at more advantageous prices.
Okay, so what is it that's going to happen in terms of, you know, the fact that we're probably going to live through a really bad depression in the next 18 months. So we've never had an economy like this. America, the world's powerhouse, is in decline. It's obvious that even if the coronavirus goes away tomorrow and we have a vaccine tomorrow, which it won't, we're going to have a really bad time for the next 18 months. and it's going to hit globally the entire world in an even way that historical economic crunches have not hit everybody uniformly at the same time in the same place in the same manner. So it's going to be a really difficult time for a lot of people. America has 25% unemployment now. Every fifth person in France now is being paid by the French government. Really difficult time. How is this going to influence long-term buying trends, long-term collecting trends, and long-term curating and let's even say hoarding trends?
Well, it obviously will have a clear impact on the art market. First of all, through the fact that people cannot get together in the same place. And this will affect museums, cultural institutions, some of which are already in huge dire straits as a result of having been closed just for 2 months or 2.5 months. And when they will reopen, and some of them will reopen fairly soon, they will only be able to let in a fraction of the amount of people who came in before. So this will create massive shortfalls for a lot of cultural institutions. Now, for the art market, it will affect auctions up to a degree, because auctions usually take place in front of a packed audience. You have, for the big evening sales, which are the bellwether of the market, they always take place in a standing room only room. Now, there, I think that technology will make it possible to continue to conduct auctions, because even pre-corona, while the rooms were packed, all the top buyers were bidding over the telephone or were bidding on the computer. So the auctioneer stood in the sale room and he was taking all the bids over the telephone from his or colleagues or her colleagues, who would convey the bids they were getting on telephone, and the other bids he would take directly from a screen where he would see people bidding from all over the world. So the audience in the auction room was playing a little bit the same room the studio audience would play in for certain TV shows. So you hear in certain TV shows, you hear the public laughing or applauding, but the show is seen by thousands or millions of people elsewhere, and you do not really need the audience in the studio to appreciate the show. So same thing about auctions. So you can very well conduct auctions over Zoom, over iPhones and all of that, and you can create the same excitement, the same drama, and all of that. Now, that doesn't answer yet your question in terms of what will be the buying mood. The buying will be affected. And even the people who have a lot of money have seen in past crises, and I think the one that we are just entering is going to be bigger than any of the ones we have lived in our lifetime, for sure. But in past crises, even the people who had all the means and were not personally so affected still found it difficult to go against the prevailing mood. So the general mood has a lot of impact on the buying habits of everybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be a very difficult time for every aspect of the institution and for every register of the art world. I have to tell you, whenever I pass by any art museum which is closed for the duration of coronavirus, I look at the posters for the exhibition that I can't go inside and see, and my heart weeps for these curators, not the artists, but for the curators who spent 2 years putting together a show about Japanese painting during the Edo period, or the new Picasso show that some poor curator spent 18 months writing a catalog about that will never be seen by people. It's such a shame. Do you have similar feelings?
I do, of course, very much sympathize with curators and museum directors and people putting these shows together. Now, I have put together an exhibition at Newland's house in West Sussex entitled Helmut Newton 100 on the occasion of the centennial of Helmut Newton's birth. And we opened to great acclaim in early March, and the exhibition was open for 3 weeks. And then we had to obviously close it to the public. Now, luckily, technology allows us to communicate with the public and do online visits of the exhibition. So you can do online tours of the exhibition. You can have specialists who come and speak. In this particular case, we will have a whole range of friends of Helmut Newton who will speak on Instagram, on websites, who will communicate what Helmut Newton meant to them individually, what the significance of Helmut Newton is today, and so on. So there are many, many ways that cultural institutions can communicate with their public at large in the meantime. But obviously, nothing replaces the physical contact with an artwork, in the same way that nothing replaces, our physical interaction. But there are ways. Just let's imagine how we would all feel right now if we did not have the chance of speaking on an iPhone, of seeing each other and communicating this way. So there are great tools available for anybody active in the art world. And a lot of artists themselves have started to communicate directly with their audience and from their studios. And this is also something wonderful.
Well, we would all get a lot more writing and reading done if we didn't have all these nice technologies, that's for sure. You actually preempted me. Could you tell the audience sitting at home about your new gallery space and project in West Sussex? And how long have you had it, and what's the point, and what does it look like?
Well, I was asked last summer by the owners of a lovely Georgian house in Petworth in West Sussex if I would be interested to help them put together a program for that cultural center. Now, I had never been to Petworth prior to last summer. And when I went there, I absolutely instantly fell in love. First of all, it's just 1 hour away from London, so it's extremely easy to get there. And you have one of the most beautiful English landscapes, completely unspoiled. I mean, how you dream of it. And then you have this very, very charming village, which again is very, very well preserved. You have incredible pubs, you have amazing restaurants, little stores and shops, etc. And so that Georgian house is not at all what you would ever imagine as a venue for a museum, because you go upstairs, you go downstairs, you go through rooms with high ceilings, some with low ceilings, and it's a whole kind of meandering experience just wandering through that building. But that's precisely what I fell in love with, because I felt here you can experience art as it is if you had it in your own home. You experience art on a very intimate scale, and it doesn't have this museum-like thing where you put art on a pedestal. And what I love about living with art is when you live with art, you don't put it on a pedestal. It's really interaction with an artwork. And that's what we were able to create in Petworth. And so in many ways, I feel that little institutions like the one in Petworth, now that everybody realizes how wonderful it is to go out in nature, going outside of the urban centers, that there is a great future, in a way, in the post-corona world for that type of institutions.
What about the positive aspects of the democratization of access to these institutions and access to people like you through this mechanism? Lots of people in the world who maybe are bright and interested and have interests and are worthy of getting a chance to listen to would never have been able to get access to an institution which you're giving a talk, or they wouldn't know where you were, or you'd be speaking at Sotheby's to a private group of experts or people inside the industry. But now there are all these people who are I invited randomly, who are very bright and interested people, and who are very much worthy of listening to someone as tremendous as you in this institution, but would not have gotten the chance before. Do you think this is going to stay after coronavirus is gone?
Yes, I do think this will stay, definitely, because I'm obviously aware of the extreme gravity of what we're going through, and I'm highly aware that we are just at the very beginning of it all. But there are, like every crisis and every really, really tough situation can bring some good things about it. And that is clearly one of the good things, is that we all have gained so much time, because a lot of us were very mobile, particularly in the art world, and I'm possibly the worst culprit, because I was every second or third day in a different place. And the art world, or the art market, was a little bit like a traveling circus that was setting up its tent, if not every day, but nearly every day, every second or third day in a different place. And so you would see some of the same people everywhere, and some of you who would look at some of the artworks by same artists all over the place. So you realize suddenly now, when you don't travel, when you don't have to go on your next air flight, that you gain a lot of time. And suddenly you realize how incredibly precious that time is. And so you are much less prepared to waste it. Now that you have gained this time, then you are usually wasting it. And we realize in hindsight how much of our time we were wasting. And we also realize, of course, the environmental cost of what we were doing individually. And I think that some of it will take care of itself, like the impact on the airline industry. And I think that none of us will travel in the same way afterwards. But we also realize that the most precious thing, like relationship with our families, like the people who are most dear to us individually, was also neglected by our very exciting but a bit crazy lives. So these are some very positive things, and it would be a great shame to abandon these things if and when things get better again.
I am also a culprit, and I actually had, like you probably, I had 9 business trips in just the first 9 weeks before coronavirus cut this off. I had 9 business trips in 9 weeks. So, I mean, and like you, I probably had withdrawal symptoms. In fact, I just published my coronavirus diary for the British magazine, The Critic, right before we came on here, an hour before I had my piece published. And I conclude with, after the plague ends and before the Messiah comes, will Air France let me keep my frequent flyer status? Funny. It was a joke, but you know, it really has changed the world in a tremendous way. There's sadly no going back unless we do get a vaccine, in which case everything will be normal in a year. But to go back to what you were saying about the traveling circus coming to all these cities, are some cities which were emerging on the art fair market world stage going to suffer? There are lots of cities, let's say like Thessaloniki, even smaller cities like Tbilisi, which are further out, which have been in the last 10, 15 years integrated into the international art markets landscape. But now these cities will not be getting the same biannual visit or annual visit from all the world's international art masters and artists and critics and curators and dealers such as yourself. So will cities which are on the third or fourth level of the global art world going to suffer long term? Cities like, let's say, Tel Aviv and Kiev, let's say, are on the second tier. These are big cities with art institutions which are already developed and art markets which are already developed. But there are cities in Africa and Asia and in the post-Soviet world which are not going to have a connection to the lifeblood of the international art world, right?
Well, they will have a connection because luckily, again, thanks to technology, there is no longer such a thing as an artist living and working in total isolation from what is happening elsewhere in the world. And I remember, you mentioned your past, where you grew up and in the Soviet Union. And I remember visiting artists in Moscow, in the early 80s and climbing into the studio, for instance, of Ilya Kabakov or Eric Bulatov, some fabulous artists that I love. And in those days, Western artists had no knowledge at all of what was happening, for instance, in Moscow, and vice versa. There was very, very little knowledge of what was happening, artistically speaking, outside. There was maybe occasionally a visitor who would bring an art magazine. But now you have some fabulous artists who live in tiny villages somewhere, and they don't need to be smack in the middle of a great art metropolis. And we can exchange information. And for instance, an exhibition like the one I mentioned now in Petworth, even while it's in a small village outside of London, it's a meaningful exhibition. It can get noticed anywhere in the world. So I don't think that is going to be a main kind of issue. Of course, in terms of amount of people who will physically get there, that will diminish.
I just would like to add something about Petworth exhibition because I have the pleasure to be and the honor to be invited by Simon when it starts in March. So we completely ignore the virus was there, but we completely ignore it. But I was extremely impressed by it. It was what I like. It was that it was a real experience. It was not only an exhibition. It was an experience to take the train, to go to this lovely small city. And I think that it's very important now. There will be a real urban art and countryside art. It means that it will be the end of the monopoly of the cities in terms of exhibitions. And I think that the art is going to follow the trend of the local because we have to eat local, to do everything local. Now art will start becoming local. And I think it's a very great news for art and the art market. It was just my small add to the conversation.
Well, is obviously, you mentioned the whole effort that you do. You're taking a train and then going out and driving through the countryside and eventually getting to the place that you came to visit. So you are, of course, in a different frame of mind, having already done that effort, if you want. It's a very pleasant one, but still, it is, you have taken the decision to do it, to get there. And then there is the scale of what you see, because we can only fully take in a limited amount of artworks. I always find when you go to a great art fair or even to a very large museum, that after a while, when you've gone through room after room after room after room, even if you're a seasoned player, you reach a stage when you no longer can fully take it in. And the pleasure of basically just seeing the right amount of artworks and having a profound exchange with these artworks is something incredibly gratifying. And so, in a way, you rediscover interaction with art that has not existed for quite a long time.
That is a skill. Sophie, we're getting a lot of questions, and I think a lot of people really want to talk to Mr. de Pury. So we already have 7 questions in the Q&A, and if we're going to get to everybody, let's already start going through those. Yeah.
Okay.
Chance to talk.
Perfect.
So we'll start with Rafik. Yeah. Hi, Simon. Over the last decade, Middle East museums have emerged as the biggest buyers of art masterpieces. One of the most expensive acquired was the Abu Dhabi Louvre Museum, Salvator Mundi of Da Vinci. Everyone knows about the $400 million Da Vinci, which was acquired in 2017. Do you really think this is something credible? If so, could that potentially discredit the reputation of auction powerhouses, which in that case might have failed to properly authenticate a piece before selling it? Authenticate a piece before selling it.
Well, first of all, let me tell you about the fantastic thing that has been happening in the Middle East over the last decade. You mentioned Abu Dhabi and the incredible program of various museums that are being built or have been built in Abu Dhabi, like the Louvre of Abu Dhabi. And then if you take into account what has happening in Qatar, you have 8 or 9 major museums that some have been built, some are in the process of being built. You have, the first one was the stunning Museum of Islamic Art that was built by IMP, which to me personally is my favorite piece of architecture by IMP. I think it's the greatest, most accomplished building that he has done anywhere in the world. And then you have also in Dubai, incredible activity. You have the design district that opened over the last few years. And then you have the Dubai Art Fair that has been taking place regularly. Then you have the Sharjah Biennial. And most importantly, you have a whole group of really very, very good artists in the whole of the Middle East who've been very active, and some who have really been getting international traction. And so in the biggest cultural projects of the 21st century, I think 2 of them I've already mentioned, are what is happening in Doha and what is happening in Abu Dhabi. And so when people will want to experience top quality artwork, they will have to do the effort or to go to those places. So in the same way that people, it's a must to go to Rome, it's a must to go to see the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, it's a must to go and see the Metropolitan Museum in New York, it's a must to go and see the Louvre. Well, it will be an absolute must for any art lover to go to Doha. It will be an absolute must for any art lover to go to Abu Dhabi. So I think this is a great, great thing. And culture is something totally global, is something, it's by understanding cultures from other areas, from other parts of the world, that we get to a better understanding between people. So culture is the ultimate bridge between people of different nationalities, different backgrounds, and culture will continue to play that role. I would say that this role will be even more essential than ever. Now, in terms of giving my opinion on certain acquisitions, this is the most expensive work that has been sold at public auction. So normally what gets the highest prices is what gets the most kind of coverage and mileage. And, that's natural that it's the most expensive works that do get, most attention.
Sophie?
Yes, I will let people ask the question directly because I am the host. I will allow Fatima to.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, it's Fatima. How are you? I just wanted to know, now that you're spending more time in Monaco, what area do you have any plans for Monaco art-wise? Is there anything interesting that you're thinking of doing here?
Well, first of all, I love living in Monaco, and it is funny because I started my career in the art market more or less, ages ago. Started it in Monaco in the early 1970s, and when Monaco was really a big center for all the top decorative art work sales and auctions that took place in Monaco. And then when in the mid-1990s, the monopoly of the French auctioneers disappeared, and through lobbying of the European Union, then Sotheby's and Christie's moved their Monaco sales to Paris. But Monaco had this tradition of being a very important place for the art market. And over the last 5 years, there has also been the Art Monte Carlo, which is an art fair that in the 4 times that it has taken place has each time gotten better. This year it's not taking place, but it'll be back in 2021, and I'm sure it's going to be better. Then you have the Musée National, which is doing wonderful exhibitions. And you have also the Villa Sauber next to the Monte Carlo Art Forum, and then some top exhibitions like the Salvador Dali show. The Francis Bacon show took place here 3 or 4 years ago, is the best Bacon show in anywhere in the world. So I think that Monaco is linking back to its great tradition of being a cultural art center, and linking back to the time when there was a Ballet Russe, Serge Diaghilev, which were in Monaco. So it is quite wonderful to see that tradition. Now, being here, yes, I would like to play a role in that, and to help, modestly from my angle, to contribute to this. How to do it, it's premature to speak about it, but I do have some ideas. And then, of course, a lot of the time that I spend is spent on philanthropy and on charity. And I had the great privilege of conducting the 3 first auctions of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, the galas, which were used to raise money to save the global ocean. And I hope to continue to be able to help that fantastic initiative of Prince Albert, because what always shocks me when I do charity auctions all over the world is to realize that only 3% of global charities, 3% only of global philanthropy goes towards saving the planet. And this is quite extraordinary. It's shocking to see how few initiatives are focusing on that. That's why I feel the next biggest danger that we have is the environmental catastrophe that is coming on us, global warming. We have seen what happened when we all ignored the warnings of the medical scientists about the epidemic, and so suddenly are totally unprepared. We are also all in denial of the global warming, of what is happening. And this is now really a wake-up call. So I think each of us have to really try and see what we can do for this. And I love the fact that in Monaco, you have a little boat going by solar energy. When Picard was the first person to go on a plane across the world that was entirely moving with solar energy, the commando center of this was in Monaco. So Monaco, I think, is at the avant-garde of what is happening for the environment, in the same way that it can play a big role in the art world.
Okay, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Fatima, for your question. I have an interesting one from an anonymous attendee who asks you, what is the craziest thing you have ever auctioned?
Oh my God. It's crazy, but I've sold so many things at different price levels. And as an auctioneer, each item is exciting to sell. And I always put, in a way, the same energy into selling something which may be worth just a few £100 or something which is going to make a world record. Of course, in the afterwards, people only speak of the world records and only of the top prices. But as I said earlier, I'm attracted by what is high and low. And when I see only exceptional things side by side, it can also be boring. What is interesting is when you mix things up, when you have something that is totally exceptional next to something maybe which is interesting visually, but which is not very rare and therefore not necessarily very expensive. It's like when you see a beautiful lady who has a lot of style. She may have some things that she wears that are, from a top brand, but there may be things that she wears that she bought from Zara or that she bought from Topshop or from a different place. And it's how this lady puts it together, which makes it special. And it doesn't mean that somebody who's only going to buy the most expensive clothes is going to be the most elegant. And that's the beauty about art, is that what you collect is your own handwriting. To collect is like an artistic pursuit in its own right. So the best collectors are artists themselves.
You don't have a history, like a hot history or something to reveal to us about something incredible, like the piece of music you have sold one time, no?
Oh, piece of music. I mean, I once was doing an auction for cancer research in Geneva, and there was the fabulous violinist Maxim Vengerov, and he was standing next to me, and then he would say, "Would you want me to play this?" And he would just play 3 or 4 things, and then we had to sell to the audience the actual program, and whoever paid the most, then he of course played the full piece of music for the whole audience, but the person who had paid the highest price then obtained a signed photograph from Maxim Vengerov plus signed records, etc. But this was a wonderful way, in a way, to raise money for a great cause. And so I've been in a lot of situations like that, particularly in charity auctions, where for instance, when I conducted an auction for the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, Madonna offered the possibility of having to go 1 hour into the gym with her. And a heated competition, and one person bid up to €1 million to spend an hour in the gym with Madonna. Then the underbidder waved his hand and said, "Listen, I actually would love to have it as well." And then I asked Leonardo DiCaprio, "Do you think you could ask Madonna if she would be prepared to offer a second person the chance to go to the gym?" So she said yes. So that second person also bid €1 million, and then a third person, the third underbidder, came as well and also offered €1 million. So €3 million were raised just for the chance of spending 1 hour in the gym with Madonna. Now, the fantastic thing is that all of that money is being used for the environment, because the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, like the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation, is one of the few foundations that is completely devoted to saving the environment, saving the oceans, saving the endangered species, and do something against global warming.
I have 2 questions. One a funny one you can ignore, and one a more obvious one you can't ignore. Do you think it's a sustainable business model turning Madonna into a personal trainer?
Now, in those some of these charity galas, it is what sometimes sells very, very well is what you call money can't buy experience. When you have some people who are very affluent and basically can afford anything, they've been everywhere, they've been on each exotic island, they've been on every yacht. I mean, it's very difficult to find something that they have not already had. And so you try and come up with experiences that even somebody very, very affluent can't necessarily have. And that's what then creates a fun reaction. But you always have surprises. And I did an auction for Amphar 2 2 years ago at the Hotel du Cap in Antibes, and they said, listen, we want you to sell a painting by Pierce Brosnan. And I love Pierce Brosnan. I think he is fabulous. He is such an elegant person. I love him as James Bond. I love him as an actor in Mrs. Doubtfire and other movies. Anyway, but I did not know that he was also an artist. And so it was a portrait that he did of Bob Dylan. And I asked before, how much do you want me to raise for it? And they told me, we want you to raise 80,000 euros. And inside my head, I thought, dream on. I mean, how on earth am I ever going to raise 80,000 euros? Well, Pierce Brosnan came on stage during the auction, and this portrait of Bob Dylan sold for $1.4 million. And again, the person who bought it is a lady who, could afford many, many different things, but she saw this as a chance of maybe getting to know Pierce Brosnan and maybe inviting him with his wife for a lunch or a dinner.
Thank you. So I will add a question. So for me, art is a mix of talent, aesthetic, technical skills, creativity, and motion. What do you think with this definition? And if you agree, where do you see any of those characteristics in what is being called contemporary art?
Well, the definition of art is a topic on which we could speak all night, and everybody has his or her own definition about it. And when I'm asked, I always like to mention the definition of art that Groucho Marx gave when he was asked that same question. He was asked, what does art stand for? And he said, well, art is the abbreviation of ARSA. Sorry, that was Groucho Marx's joke. But I think that you have many, many artists around the world who are very skilled, and some have great technical skills, some don't. And there is only a tiny percentage of artists who really do make it, and who get their work to be exhibited in galleries, who get to be even able to live off their own work, and let alone then have it shown and be shown in museums and public institutions. But when we look at a lot of art, or when we listen to a lot of music, it's what has this little extra dimension, which creates a strong emotion and lifts our spirits and gives us strength, gives us courage. And it's really something very difficult to define. But I think that particularly in a period like now, it is art that helps us to, even if we are despaired, if we are discouraged. Of course, it doesn't pay the bills. However, listening to an incredible piece of music, or seeing, even if it's just a reproduction on an iPhone of a great artwork, it gives you belief in humanity. It gives us belief, yes, we will make it through this. Yes, it is amazing. It is extraordinary. And it is that quest of being lifted, of experience totally exceptional, that truly great art does to us. Now, of course, there are plenty of things that are defined as being art that some of us may not feel is particularly artistic or is really art, but that's okay. It's all in the eye of the beholder. We each have different views about it.
Great. I will ask a question to Caroline Blasiak.
I think that's a good question, Sophie, actually. I was going to ask the same one.
Yeah, so I will allow her to talk.
Yes, bonsoir, good evening. Thank you for preparing such an important discussion in those challenging times. And I have a question to Simon. If Simon would advocate for creating a productive link between private and public institutions in order to provide support and promote contemporary art. And do you believe, Simon, that this type of action will enable secured and social impact investment within the art market?
Well, I think that in post-corona times, we all will need to rethink how cultural institutions, whether public or private, how they're being sustained and how they're being helped and to make it, because they play such a key role in our lives, in the education of youth and so on. And I think that all businesses that are not in areas that are essential, such as luxury, like fashion, like the art market itself, in a way, every business should in future not just do, charitable events or charity initiatives, but every transaction that you do, a percentage or a cut of every transaction should then go to a cultural institution or several cultural institutions or several charities. It may be, it has to be the choice of the business itself. But I think that this is going to be necessary because we will need to find ways to raise funds for those institutions that is different from the way we did it so far. And we have to rethink how all of this is going to happen, but that is totally essential. And then, of course, also find ways where to integrate artists in the planning of our lives, the planning of cities. The cities will not be able to be built anymore in the way they are being built today. The nature will have to take back the cities up to a certain degree. And so artists will be immensely useful in coming up with scenarios where life inside the cities will be made far more friendly and far more welcoming and far better for the environment. And it's only artists that will be able to help us. And so for these projects of urbanization or real estate projects or projects by governments, it's going to be very, very important to incorporate artists in the planning of these projects, because it's artists who have the vision, who see the picture and who see ahead of our time, who see things that we do not see yet.
Do you think, sir, that there's going to be an entire new genre of coronavirus or post-coronavirus art, whatever that might look like? Maybe it'll be computer art, maybe it'll be new video art, maybe it'll be new curatorial assemblages. Will something new come out of this? Remember, Sophie, when we had Bernard-Henri Lévy on here a couple of weeks ago, we asked him if there was going to be a literature of coronavirus, like there was a plague literature in the 18th century. So will there be a coronavirus art? And if so, what will that look like?
Well, first of all, I think that many artists, also some who were quite successful, have been pressurized a lot by the success of the art market. And so there were so many art fairs, and that a lot of artists were kept producing for the next art fair because their galleries kept saying, I need this for the fair in Paris, I need this for the fair in Brussels, I need this for the fair in Cologne, etc., etc. And so now they can free themselves from that immediate commercial pressure and really create works in the much bigger, grander scheme of things. So I think that we will see great art being created during this period. And so it will be a very fertile period for great art being created. Now, the technological revolution has had two impacts. One was that some classical ways for artists to express themselves, namely oil on canvas or sculpture, doing bronzes or ceramics or pieces or works in glass or even textiles, have had a renaissance. And a lot of artists have gone back to basics, using techniques that have been used forever. At the same time, you have a whole group of artists who have been experimenting fully with what the technological revolution gave them as new means, and who have used that and have created art that you can only experience on your screen. And of course, there is also all the video art. And I just heard today there is this website, I think it's called DAAD, that was created by Anita Zabludovitz from the Zabludovitz Foundation, which is focusing solely on video art and digital art. And this online site has just made a link with the key galleries in the art market. And now all of the artists that are focusing on video art or that are focusing on digital art are going to be able to have this as an outlet to get their art seen by a wider public, but also to get their work sold to a wider public. And then you have people who combine the old and the new techniques. You mentioned the project that I'm doing in Petworth, but I also have a joint venture with Asprey, which is called De Pury and Asprey. And amazing exhibition of a young Chilean artist called Guillermo Lorca, which we were luckily able to do right before the Corona thing, and which was a big success. Now we are working on an exhibition of a very talented British artist called Henry Hudson. And Henry Hudson is using iPads to do portraits in the same way that David Hockney is using his iPad, but he is in a way mixing 21st century technology with ancient technology, because he then works stone tablets, and stone tablets have been around since Moses. And once he's projected it, he then works on the stone tablet, and then you hang that stone tablet and you have a portrait unlike any portraits that ever been made. And when these works are going to be physically shown, I think it's going to be pretty sensational.
Okay, great. So now we have 2 more minutes and a few more questions. I will give the word to Tugba Tarim.
Hi, Simon.
Hi,
Thank you.
Tugba.
Hi. Do you think that the collector's choice will change after quarantine?
Yes, I do think that taste will evolve. You see, the interest for art will always continue to grow. I think this is a thirst that we all have in us. And I also think that the market over time will always, widen. However, taste is what constantly evolves. And I think that the Corona will accelerate the change of taste, and that some artists that were red hot pre-Corona may not be as red hot post-Corona. And some others, maybe that were not being particularly noticed before, will come out big time afterwards. And that is something that has happened in every crisis and will be even more amplified this time.
So now the last question is, we love your art TV show, Work of Art. When is the next one? Good question.
Well, the art TV show, it was called Work of Art, The Next Great Artist, was a reality TV show on Bravo TV, which ran, I think it was 10 years ago, and it was co-produced.
Georgie will
Each episode was seen by 1.5 million people. So I saw it fantastic, because that are seen by the artists. But Bravo channel, they shows housewives, they housewives from various parts of the United States. And of course, 1.5 million per episode versus what the housewives have as an audience is nothing. And so after 2 seasons, they stopped the series. I was disappointed because I enjoyed doing it. It was great fun doing it. There were some very good artists that participated, and it was a wonderful way for a different public to experience what it is to be an artist, what it is to produce an artwork, and what it is also to explain an artwork.
Sophia, can I cheat and ask one last question personally?
Yeah, of course.
Mr. de Pury, I'm quite interested in you as a thinker. Who do you read in terms of art critics that you love? Who's your favorite of the 20th century? Maybe dead, like maybe Arthur Danto type art critics. And who's your favorite living art critic?
I will shock you incredibly now, because when I started in the art world 50 years ago, and I was born in Basel, raised in Basel in Switzerland, and maybe the fact that I was born there had something to do with the choice of my career. And my mother was desperate. She thought I had this boy who was hopeless at school, and she called Ernst Beiler, who was the big dealer in Basel, and said, "Listen, I have a hopeless case on my hands. Can you please talk some sense to this boy?" And I went to see Ernst Beiler, and he said, "I hear you love art." And I said, "Yes, I do." Then he said, "Is your approach to art intellectual or is it physical?" I answered him, "It's purely physical." Then he told me, "In that case, do not study history of art, go straight into the art market." I followed his advice. I never regretted following his advice. But even to this day, my love for art and my passion for art is physical. So I'm not very good at articulating why I think that something is phenomenal, why I think something is important. I do think that I have a pretty good judgment of what is good and what is less good, just for the fact of having been around for so long. However, I spend very little time of reading art criticism. I do read, of course, and with great interest, and they are great. You know, I do read Jerry Saltz, who was with me in that reality TV shows that we mentioned earlier, and he is a wonderful man, a wonderful person. And then the one person I really enjoy enormously reading is Kenny Schachter. Kenny Schachter has a lot of sense of humor. His articles are so entertaining. And then he's also an artist, so he creates memes, he creates little simulations. And so for people with short attention span like me, what he does is a dream.
Thank you very much, Simon. We are now in London. It's 8 o'clock, and we hear the people clapping their hands to salute the NHS people. So it's the only a bit lively moment of our days, even in Paris. And do you have it in Monaco as well? People clapping at 8?
You have it as well. Now, I live not that far from the port, and so all the boats at 8 o'clock sharp honk their horns. So from 8 to 10 past 8, you have this beautiful concert with every boat that is in the port of Monaco honking their horn.
Thank you very much, Simon de Pury. Thank you very much, Vladislav. It was a very thought-provoking discussion. And I think we could conclude that during all this period of coronavirus, we hear about essentials, shops, essential things. And according to discussion, I think we can all agree on the fact that art is essential.
Quite clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And for the question who hasn't been asked or etc., sorry, but we have a lot of questions and we have just 1 hour. So hopefully we will reorganize an event like this because it was such a success, and we will do many of them even after the coronavirus and the quarantine period. Thank you very much to all of you. Bye-bye.
Tremendous
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.